Okay, it's not that.
Don't say it. Don't say it.
Okay, I'm Lone, and I work as a researcher at Aalborg University in Denmark, where I'm head of what's called the Danish Center for Environmental Assessments. I work with environmental science and especially decision making and how to link all the knowledge we have, the knowledge we can create, with the decision making in society at different levels. And I'm starting to explore, based upon my more than 20 years experience, that scientific knowledge is definitely not enough, and starting to explore more the roles of arts in relation to environmental science and civil society and political spheres.
Yes, my name is Falk Heinrich, or Felk Heinrich. I'm a scholar from Aalborg University, and I'm head of a research lab, the Research Laboratory for Art and Technology. 20 years ago, I've been working as an actor and a theater director, and also a little bit as an installation artist. And I'm writing about installation art, interactive installation art, participatory art, and I'm very interested in this combination between artistic approaches, artistic methods, methodologies, and the scientific methodology. So how to bring those two approaches together? Are there possibilities? What are the possibilities?
Hello, my name is Merja Brinjan. I'm visual artist and arts manager working at the moment as an executive director in Kulttuurikauppila Art Center in northern Finland. And also I am artistic director of Art Biennale. I had a small presentation yesterday in the seminar about Biennale, and I'm interested in, especially in my own artistic work, concepts combining arts and science.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Martin Howes. So I'm, I guess, independent artist and researcher, and I'm here because we start a workshop tomorrow in Hytiala Forest Research Station, which Mari is also part of the team involved in this, also with Erik Berger, Ulla Tappele, and some other people. Jamie Allen, yeah, as part of a project which is funded by the Swiss National Foundation for Science. Yeah. So this is kind of like an introduction also, just to being in Finland, to get into the frame. So I should say a bit, the workshop is more or less about, or this kind of originating concept was around non-linear notions of geology. So we're looking at peatland and forest land as ways of looking at kind of cyclical time and of actions which involve like experience. Thank you.
My name is Mari Keskikorsu. I'm interdisciplinary artist from Finland. And my current practice is very much focused at this moment in this kind of empathetic interspecies communication. And I also work, the reason why I'm here is that I'm part of the artist campus, Jus and Christine and Åsa. And the reason, I guess, why I'm in this art and science group now is that I combine a lot of science, not science practices, but I work a lot with scientists and what else? I guess that's about it.
My name is Eva-Lisa and I'm from the organizing team. But I'm actually I'm an artist, but I'm also a water engineer. Worked for over 10 years for water. And I'm living in Berlin, but come from Finland.
Hi, I'm Åsa Ståhl. I'm an artist and a researcher. I'm part of the artist camp here, so you'll hear more about that and my collaboration with Christina and the participants very soon. I'm also a senior lecturer at the Design Institution at Linnaeus University in Sweden. Ta-da!
Hello, I'm Björn Kröger. I'm here in Helsinki at the Natural History Museum of Helsinki, and I'm the curator for the paleontology collection, fossil collection. And I'm German. I'm originally from Berlin. And in Berlin, I also did a lot of work with kids. So I dug holes and just open-ended. And I'm quite interested in art and in non-scientific issues or topics. And my scientific interest is in how organisms, I would say, create worlds. So that's in scientific terms called ecological engineering, which I think is the wrong word, but that's the key word for it. And I'm also specialist for cephalopods, for things like nautilus or octopus or squids. So that's the thing I'm doing. So, okay.
Hello, I'm Wiebke Pandiko. I'm also German, but have been living in Finland for 10 years. I'm an artist. I mostly work in jewelry, and over the last 3 years I've used plastic bags and developed a technique how to use them in a way that they do not remind people of plastic bags anymore at all. And I'm very interested in ecosystems and how things are interconnected, and I like to. This is also things that are background for my work in most cases.
Hello, David Woodruff, originally from New Zealand, but lived in New York many years, in Vancouver, Canada, traveled most of the world, worked in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So I'm now trying to discover and learn and teach new ways to bridge art and science. In other words, the humanities have a lot to contribute to science and vice versa. So I'm exploring those possibilities and looking at creating sentinels in the Arctic, in the polar regions, that will inform future generations of how we're doing in adapting to climate change. And I've worked with Wally Broker, Jim Hansen and others in New York 40 years ago, and the limits to growth issues, when they came up, we debated how to proceed. So 40 years later, we're still trying, and so I'm here to learn and teach. Thank you.
Let's wait for the... Oh, okay. Okay. Let's wait for the airplane for a second. I've been working actually 20 years in the film industry, and this is very common that everything stops and you wait for the airplane or some other things to go by. But yes, I have been working as a production manager in film industry and taking care of the continuity in films. And then because I was enthusiastic as a child of biology, I started to study in Helsinki University environmental ecology. And while I was studying there, I was looking at many environmental artworks that really touched me, and especially Jan Arthus Bertnad's photographs with the beautiful picture and then something about the environment. They touched me, and I thought that I want to do a master thesis about this. And then it took 2 years for me to find in Helsinki University, from the aesthetic department and from the ecology department, people who would help me to do my master thesis in environmental ecology and the restoration of ecosystems, and how environmental art can be a helpful co-partner in these huge planning works. Because when you are restoring an ecosystem that has been altered by human beings, you need to have the historical and the cultural and the ecological knowledge, and that's the base material when you start to do. But my interest was that how can an environmental artist give an impact and surplus to these huge projects and see, and also the aesthetic view of the ecosystem would change, but also the spirit of the ecosystem would become something not in the same as it was before the restoration from the natural state. You have the natural state of the ecosystem, and then human beings use the land, and then you restore it. It becomes something else. But my ideas in the thesis was that what is the third level of this after the restoration work, and I then studied two of the artworks here in Finland and tried to find the scientific backgrounds to see what kind of biological values these artworks did to the ecosystem. And the artworks were Tree Mountain from 1996, and then The Magic of Waters 2015. No, sorry, 10. I will. This is just if you want to know more about it. But that's how I am in this seminar as a facilitator.
Hello, I'm Kati Vierikko, and I was invited to this by Anu. Thanks for her. My background is in science. I am a PhD in environmental sciences, and I did my doctoral thesis on sustainable forest management. But before that, I did my master thesis on lichen taxonomy. So I was more into taxonomy and biology before I turned out to be more societal oriented when I was doing my PhD work. I have been also very active in local politics and nature conservation here in Helsinki, so I know quite well what is going on in land use planning in Helsinki, and I also been working with the artists, especially in environmental artists, when they are doing their works in Helsinki environment, and that's why I'm now here today. Before we invite first speakers, I will shortly tell what is our plan for today. So we will have a few invited speakers, but I hope that we are very dialogue and collaborative during today. And our issue is, I think, quite challenging in how to combine science and art, and also considering ethical issues. And yesterday we were thinking with Sanna, should we raise up few subjects that we focus on today, and Sanna already mentioned ecological restoration, and I think it's very much linked to ecosystem services and how we value different environments and places, and why we decide to restore others when the others can be destroyed and do nothing. And we have also this ecological compensation idea. So this is kind of issues we would kind of offer you to have our subjects today, but also not raising up the challenges today and obstacles, but we could even consider to be more pragmatic and design a new project together. If we would consider that the issue would be like ecological compensation, or it could relate to ongoing land use planning in Helsinki or somewhere else. But today we might even end up to share our ideas and start to build a new project. But let's see what will happen.
Great. So, Heinrich and Bruno, would you like to?
So there's two microphones.
Which one?
I would like to go outside. outside here.
Yeah.
Are we okay here?
Yes.
Think so. Just relating to your idea about the ecosystem and service and compensation, it's not part of our presentation, but it's definitely something we would also like to dip into in the discussion. And for the compensation part, let's say like in Denmark, it seems like it's the same here in Finland, that nature, it's being more and more legitimized to compensate.
Yeah.
So it's something we can relate to in the Danish planning or political scene. Okay.
Yeah. The beginning of the presentation is very much the same as yesterday, and most of the people here were following yesterday's seminar. There are two, so I don't know. Maybe very shortly, you could describe the case.
Yeah. It's a cooperation project with Pelle Brau and Julia Brun, coming from Denmark, or Pelle is coming from Denmark, now living in Norway. And we did a project together last year, and then we did another one this year, which was also collaboration with the Art Museum in Aalborg Kunsten. And yesterday we talked about how we work with kids in workshops, building ball tracks for the future relating to sustainability and their future life, and we explained yesterday what we found of more effective influence with the kids. They were like participating, and we could see some good indications of them considering their role and their empowerment in relation to sustainability. But that was yesterday. But today it's a short presentation about our reflections upon working together. Like Falk is from humanities, I'm from engineering, science, and working with an artist. So it's quite transdisciplinary, just for us to understand each other. And then also working with Pelle as an artist. And the expectations, of course, it's like we have our own individual expectations, but what also glue us together is that by combining our different kinds of knowledge, our different ways of working, approaching, perceiving the world, that we can do something that is not just an addition of all the things we can, but also something a bit different. That was like the basic idea, or our idea in it. This is just a few pictures for those of you who were not there yesterday. It's Pelle and I, and up here we have all the kids sitting before they're going down to build or create a ball track, choose their notions regarding sustainability, and tell a story, like the storytelling about their future life, how they can see themselves in the future as adults. What will they bring into their future life? How do they respond to sustainability? What does it mean for them, and so on. The ball, one of the examples, like there's been like hundreds of ball tracks now of futures being played out, adults and kids. We were only playing with the kids. How they deal with the different complexity, what notions, what to bring into their future life. Here it says like investment in science or gold jewelry. A lot of choices to be made about your future. So that was a very short version of the ball track. So in relation to the findings and our experiences in working together across our different disciplines, our different experiences, and with Pelle.
Yeah. Now it's my turn.
It's your turn.
Let me just very shortly explain. This is actually part 2 of a collaboration between Lone and Pelle, and it started 2 years earlier. We had a land art or landscape festival in the northern part of Jutland, and I was part of the steering committee there, and I wanted to explore the collaboration between scientists or scholars and artists. That's why I proposed to to bring artists exhibiting or working for this landscape. It was called Festival, and scholars from mainly Aalborg University together. And we formed 4 groups, and Lone and Pelle was one group, and it was actually the group that worked best because of, as I think, there was a personal dedication, but also a kind of opening, a kind of that we wanted to explore something, and we are not stuck in our practice, in our art form. So I worked together with another artist, and it was a really hard process because he was just doing his artwork. And then he could explain me, and I could come from a more art historian, art theoretical perspective, but nothing really happened. But in your case, you came up with this ball track idea, placed in the woods, and then you developed it together with me to make this more interactive event with kids. So we have three persons here, and it's actually very important for me to say that those are persons, human, as persons that have their praxis, they have their profession as well, but also this opening towards something else, because they have this feeling, we have this feeling that something is missing or something has to be explored. In your case, maybe you could just state why you are interested in working with
No, I think as I just briefly explained, like working more than almost 20 years with environmental issues in different ways, planning, urban planning, environmental planning, infrastructure planning, working with how to bring knowledge about the impacts into decision making. And I work very much as an action researcher, so for me to engage with the processes is the way I do work. And it makes a difference, but I also see, or I've seen over the years, that despite the knowledge is there, like we have all the knowledge needed, it's like margin. But that knowledge is not really, or at least not always brought into action and actually for pro-environmental behavior. So I've always over these years been very curious about what is it that when we're making decisions as human beings, as organizations, as political institutions, what's actually happening, because it's definitely not linear and economic rational decision making. So for me it's just felt quite natural to see, okay, what can we then bring in? If it's not knowledge, it's more our body, it's our emotions. And that's a place where I experience art makes a difference in my life, in my kids' life, in society. So to bring like a more holistic view upon knowledge, but also as us as human beings in a society.
Yes. And for me, I mean, this is very much my personal history. I started off as an artist, as an actor, and worked with theater, being on stage and also directing things, and then come into academia in a more theoretical field where I looked and analyzed things. So I wanted to bring those two parts of my life together and say, okay, what could happen? What will emerge from there? And I was trained at a very conservative university, Aarhus University, and they said, yeah, but okay, you can analyze things, but you can't analyze your own stuff. You can't analyze your own work, because then it's not academic enough. And this I always puzzle, say, no, that's not true, because I have my experience with making things, which of course I can analyze and bring to another theoretical level. In the case of Pelle, I don't know. So he's maybe you can say something about Pelle's ambition, why he wanted to collaborate with especially you, and the knowledge on sustainability and environmental sciences.
Pelle is very playful, so he's very open in his work and in his approach to collaboration. But it was the starting point was the shared vision about we need to do something. I can't do it, you can't do it. But if we combine our knowledge, our approaches, then we can maybe do something more towards sustainability. And that was like the shared vision.
Yes.
Of trying to impact. And Pelle has a long history of working with especially kids. And for me that was new, because I work with my own kids, but then adults. So the shared vision about transition towards something more sustainable, what that might be.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah? So
Just-
maybe we go on, yes?
Just, we did maybe just say a few words to some of these, because for us it was not just what we experienced with the kids, but for us it's also been a positive experience working together, and we have reflected with Pelle about what made it work, because sometimes you can bring people together and it doesn't work, and it has also, it's not just been easy. And we have written a few of the elements that we have experienced as being a necessity for us to cooperate. And I'll just mention a few of them. And the first one will be, because of time as well, curiosity and courage. We've all been very curious about what will happen, what can we create, which is also related to the last one, because neither Pelle or us had like a very fixed idea what will come out of this. We had this idea about future sustainability, something about tracks you can build, different scenarios, but it was not fixed, which also meant that we actually had a playground, we had an arena for doing some work together. And then for the courage thing, it's something that I especially have experienced. Like, I come from the engineering faculty, and I've brought Pelle into my teaching, and I've been doing this work, and there have been either people have said, okay, interesting, or some have said, are you sure that this is science? Are you sure? Is that really what a researcher should do? And that had opened up a few discussions about what is science, what is my role as a researcher in society. So we have also experienced that when you start to make something transdisciplinary, you're also pushing some of the boundaries, some of the norms for what you do and what you don't do. And then it's just taken a lot of time. So many rounds just to get to know each other's languages, ways of working. Like, I'm definitely much more structured. You're like kind of in between, and Pelle is like this, like all over the place. And just to try to merge this to something that we could all be happy in, it took time. Yeah. Something to...
No?
No?
I think we don't have that much time.
No. But we have a few questions.
Yeah.
Just a few. Because just as projects and cooperation also get some experience, but it also raises a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And
the question I have mainly is this one. So how to preserve artistic independency? Because now it's very clear that we use Pelle and we use some artistic strategies in order to communicate something very distinct. It's about sustainability. It's not just a reflection or a imagination or a illusion around a theme. We want to learn or to communicate specific things to children. So what about the artistic independency, autonomy, the purposeless, the much acclaimed purposelessness of art? Is it still there? Is it still necessary? Is it outdated? Has art shifted in a way, changed from being this purposeless activity towards something else? This would be my theoretical interest in it.
yeah.
And then you have a scientific.
It was because I was triggered, put that up, and I said, but what about the other side of it, the scientific part? But actually, over like during the many discussions we've had over the last few months, actually, like what's being sometimes put up as something opposing and something we should overcome. If I really boil it down to something simple, then, as you said, Falk, it's about us as human beings. It's about us as individuals. So not so opposing if we have like the same or similar outset of a curiosity and a willingness to do things in a different way. Then I'm not so worried actually about the artistic independency or the scientific validity. It might look different.
Mm-hmm.
But as an environmental scientist, I think it serves a higher purpose. Yeah, but that's some of the questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we are
done.
We are done, and maybe the discussion afterwards will bring up some questions or some discussions around those issues, topics.
Yes.
Or do we have more?
No.
Would somebody want to comment right away, or shall we?
Yeah.
Just a minute.
You get this one, and then we can share.
It gives so much more pressure to have this one. But I just thought to comment quickly on this artist independency or scientist independency, or however way you put it. I think that is slowly changing because, to my experience, it's quite clear that often the artists approach scientists that they want to do something together, but that is also changing. Also, the scientists are now approaching artists, and I think it's really important to kind of like remember this kind of path that we have been going. Also, that I also remember the times when I really felt that the scientists wanted me to popularize their research results. So I think there should be like really mutual understanding in the beginning before you start doing anything. That, like for example, the people that I'm working with now, they asked me to be part of their research group. And when I'm reading the papers that now we are making the funding application, it's very clearly written there that that this is not about that art has its own kind of like agency in this project, and I think it's really good to discuss this through and not to just leave it like, yes, we are doing good stuff, but also so that we can develop ourselves and develop the projects that we are working with, because there is so many possibilities and so much to gain from this. So just wanted to comment on that.
I think you say it very clearly, and what you also do is like opening up for all the different modes of collaboration. There's not just one; they're different. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also about the timing when we meet, whether we can actually do an equal collaboration.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my name is Just Seinsalu. I mainly work with clay. Clay as a material, as a medium, as an environment, and overall goal or the essential question that I have is to reveal the embodiment of life in inanimate materials, and clay has been the material or the subject that then, through what I'm trying to answer this question or find some kind of result or evidence of that. And then in my practice I use a lot of scientific methodologies to study clay material, and then in different ways I receive visual material that I analyze, and then by combining it with the mythology, with poetics, with philosophy, I combine and find a kind of a mutual story to forward. So these are just like different patterns that different types of clays create when they are combined with light. And I look at light as a modifier of material that enables a different perspective on solid matters or materials as clays too. Sometimes the studio becomes or is in a laboratory. In this case, I've been using electron microscope to look at clay and then combine it or place it next to photograms that are made from clay. And so then in this kind of a different scaling of micro level and then macro, and then looking at like aerial footages of the landscape where the clay is taken, and then to kind of observe and see whether there are similarities or there is total difference. And so what I discovered throughout the work is that each clay has their own kind of characteristics and patterns that are created, similar to a DNA that we look as alive or like life organisms. And I do think that the way we hierarchize materials and the mineral matter as something that is not alive is not the correct way. And I think yesterday we were listening a little bit of tea time as a term, and I think that the way we look or when we witness the presence of life is something that can be spanned out in a different time scale. And in that case, like earth or the kind of a solid ground material will be alive or will be witnessed as alive matter. Anyways, I'm much more interested, or mostly interested, of the aspect of invention in art and in science, and how do we come up with even the questions that we try to answer. How do we find ways to work on them and to invent tools, invent machines that allow us to look closer, to look further away to the space. And sometimes how we even have to invent language to describe what we are seeing, because there is not yet terms or words to describe what they are. These are projections of through ceramic lenses that I've been working with, where like clay material is fused with glass, and then when they are projected or magnified, they become light. Just examples of different work where light and clay material are put together in different patterns, and different perception or the understanding of material comes present. As well, I think throughout the work I've been started to think about the agency of the material itself, and like what clay can tell us about of life or like, of ways of being. And as well, during the last days, and as well, I guess, reflecting back on my own work, like where comes the aesthetics of science, the visuality of it, the tools that are invented, the machines, the diagrams, and is it something that then, let's say, myself is using a specific visuality of my work? Is it looking scientific because it has its simplification in shape and form, or is it so there's some kind of a combination of the language, like the visual language in science and art, that I'm very interested to see and kind of start to like look into like where it comes from and who decides what is what. And here on Varttosaari I made a simple field study by gathering different ground materials, whether it's dirt, clay, soil, some plant matter, and I made slides that can be viewed up on the hill that is right here through the simple magnifying glasses. And it's all to kind of change the perspective of the ground that we're standing on and to look at it from a different angle. But I guess, yeah, the main point of this talk is to question that how do we invent ways to reveal something that we don't even know what we are after, or how do we ask questions that we don't know what we want to ask, because it's only a sensation or a feeling that drives us or drives the artist and drives scientists to go on and kind of study the world. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Does somebody want to comment something immediately? Yeah, okay.
Just a comment on.
Let's take a microphone for you also. Yeah. Stay there.
About the idea that how we talk about the things that we can't see or realize. I think this is very common nowadays. People, we don't have to take even microscope to realize that there are missing worlds and realities we can't see. I think nowadays we are very like looking at the through very small tube and not see what is going on. And I think when you speak with people about the word biodiversity, it's something not understandable. Mm-hmm. It's something that is disappearing even among discussion nowadays, that it exists there, but people can't see and can't realize that. Despite we have talked that since Rio 1992 very much, but still it's kind of, we can't see it, we can't understand it.
Yeah. I think many ways art could be used as a tool to bring closer those kind of, or bring closer to understanding or feeling those kind of bigger questions that otherwise stay in a level of theory or stay too far away. And maybe it's too simple to think that art can do that, but I at least like to think or believe that. But yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
The next presentations are all from Kristina. Would you like to have that one? Yes. Do you need a table or?
No, we can just put it on the floor. How does this work? How do I?
You will just keep it in your hand, and the other one is that could include them.
Okay.
I have one here, like a kangaroo.
Would you like to fix that? Or
if it's possible, but she said it was broken.
Sorry. This way. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The
and
chair
here
is
is the
right
mic.
there.
Okay, so I can just put this.
Introducera då så kan jag läsa.
So my name is Kristina.
I'm Åsa Ståhl.
And we're going to start off this short talk with reading a sequel or a narrative that we have been writing on during our stay here, and it's a sequel to this book that we have written before called Plastic Imaginaries, The Composter Meets the Rag Picker. And this story is partly based on things we have researched on before, but also explored here during our stay on the island together with others.
And maybe we can say that it's part of an ongoing inquiry into how we're living with plastic imaginaries. Okay?
Yeah.
Unmaking plastic imaginaries, plugging, composting and making.
Yeah, you heard me. I'll hang them there. We've heard it. We've all heard all about all the sticks, spears and swords. The things to bash and poke and hit with, the long, hard things. But we have not heard about the thing to put things in, the container for the things contained. That is a news story. That is news. So Ursula K. Le Guin wrote in her text, The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction, in 1986. News in 2017. A new kind of gathering emerges, plogging, a combination of picking plastic waste and jogging is added to the Swedish vocabulary and repertoire of practices. The carrier bag speaks back. It is enabling storage and mobility, but is often left behind for ploggers to gather and collect. News in 2017. A scientist and amateur beekeeper had found a plastic bag that wax moth caterpillars had eaten through. Polyethylene's resemblance with beeswax seemed to make it possible for the moth to biodegrade the bag that was thought to have a much longer life. The species that most beekeepers would consider a pest came out as a hero or a savior from excessive production and use of plastics. Galleria Mellonella, near threatened in Finland, rural biotopes and cultural habitats, causes of threat, overgrowing of meadows and other open habitats, lives in bee colonies. If we add beeswax to the story, we will find another kind of savior, a protoplast that comes both before and after plastic bags, for wrapping, carrying, caring and saving. This is not a story with one hero or savior, but a modest, ongoing living with others in a multi-species labour force. Bees, wax moths, ploggers, composters, rag pickers, common mealworms, bacteria, fungi, fossils, and more.
Yeah, so in our previous work, we have also worked with issues related to plastics, and in this work we have always started off in a quite recent scientific finding related to plastics that has in some way moved us and also others in the way that they are almost like something taken out of a science fiction movie or novel. So the first thing that we did was to arrange walks where we looked for a new geological entity called plastiglomerates, and it's basically a combination of lava stone and plastics and other things. So we, as an event, we arranged walks in Iceland to look for these stones. And the second set of events that we had done were more focusing on another finding that showed that common mealworms that you usually think of perhaps as a pest that you don't want to have in your kitchen because they eat your grains and such, but that they now can biodegrade styrofoam that you, for example, might use when you have a takeaway. So we made quite simple composting kits that look like this. So it's basically just a glass jar, and then you cut a hole, and then you put a metal net on top. And then people, we had a workshop, and people would then bring those home, and just to see what it would be like if you would actually compost your plastics by yourself at home. And based on those two events, we wrote this, the Plastic Imaginaries, the rag picker meets the composter. So this story is based on both things that are possible today, but also some of the speculations and stories that were kind of imagined in these events. And then in during this week, we have invited one or several new characters into this potential narrative or reimagination. And in this case, it is the wax moth.
So, as part of our ongoing research project, we're on the lookout for how we live with and without plastics, or also how we can imagine living with or without plastics. And then, of course, this wax moth caterpillar caught our eyes, as well as this news that was starting to travel in Sweden about ploggers meeting up to pick up plastic waste as a kind of combined, wellness for yourself and wellness for the world practice. We find it really interesting with those tensions, like I read out with the savior, the hero, the savior, but also the troublemaker at the same time, because this wax moth caterpillar, now it's near threatened in Finland, but if we started to ask this wax moth caterpillar for lots of help with biodegrading plastic bags, we would also have the trouble of how to keeping them away from beehives, because they would, they do double work. They both eat the beeswax and they would eat your plastic bag. So, as the kinds of researchers in our positioning in this combination of arts and science, we're working with the dilemmas that emerge in ongoing living, both with what we already have, but also new findings and how the world speaks back to us as sort of answers to our accumulated excessive living.
And one thing that kind of spoke back to us during our stay here was the wax moth the wax moth caterpillars that we had some difficulties keeping alive, even though we tried to feed them with the things that they usually eat, possibly because of the quite cold climate here at the moment. So then we also started to work more with the beeswax as an alternative to plastics, and we have tried to make, or we have made wax cloths that can be used for wrapping or wrapping food and such.
So one observation we did when we did a plogging session, but you can't really go jogging then. Well, you can't jog too fast because then you won't see the small pieces of plastics that are here on the island. It's quite well kept, this island. It seems like people are already sort of practicing a kind of plogging here, not littering a lot or picking up after others. So we had to slow down in order to see the tiny pieces, and most of them are connected to, like we've also incorporated in this story, most of them are connected to wrappings around food stuff, so we can eat while we're also moving, or get our snack on the go. So most of the things we found were these small small pieces of food containers or wrappings, and this is actually an alternative to that, because you can wrap your sandwich or your apple or store your leftovers, and it's not a new practice. It's an old practice. It's like a protoplast. It's something that people have done over the years, and that we can continue doing.
Can we put it around?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, we can also pause there. these around.
These are a bit saturated with wax. Actually, they don't have to have so much plastics. Wax.
How
Sorry.
many jars were there when you did it with the first one?
The first time around. I think in the first, we call it domestic plastic composting event. I think we handed out something like 20 jars.
Yeah.
And we met up a couple of weeks later and stayed in touch with the people who had it in their homes. And yes,
Yeah.
sure. And there were all kinds of living with the common mealworms. So the question was about the events that we did with the common mealworms. And it ranged from, keeping them as pets, because some participants thought they were too valuable to feed with styrofoam, and others who embraced our invitation to use them as multi-species labor force, so they were just, feeding them with styrofoam.
But also a bit concerned that they were not efficient enough, that they were quite slow.
And others who threw them out, got really scared, or one of their co-inhabitants got really scared. So really this feeling of introducing a pest into your home, being worried about prices on your apartment going down if you had it pest infested. Lots of strong feelings. Pest. Oh, pesto. Yeah, some also thought of them as pesto or as a kind of food source, because exactly they're the common mealworms are and again, it's already an ongoing practice in the world of eating common mealworms because of the proteins and the fats that they have. And we also then, sort of with that incentive, we also organized an event where we served common mealworms in 2 different ways. That's also been incorporated into the story that's circulating. Yes? The microphone. Do we have both? Or is there a third?
There's only 2.
Okay.
Which one? Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to raise the question about when you feed the mealworms with plastic and then again you use it as food. The mealworms must be heavily contained with plastic, so in a way you're kind of infesting your body with plastic. And it's known that household products like toothpaste, for instance, that has these really, really small grains of plastic, it lingers on in your body, not only for a period of time. It actually, we're polluted with plastic waste in our bodies that also is transferred to the next generation. So does using living organisms in a composting process really relieve us of the problem, or is it just pushing it along into another part of the food chain or our life chain, so to speak?
Yeah, well, first off, we didn't actually eat the worms that had biodegraded plastics. That was more of a imagined scenario. So the worms that we served were bred to be human food, and the ones that we have used, we have bought in reptile stores, so they are bred to be food for reptiles. But you're raising important questions, and those are questions that we do not necessarily have a definite answer to. But it's more the things that we want to also bring up with these kind of experiments. And also, I mean, the papers that we have read, usually the experiments are very short, like 4 weeks or something like that. And yeah, the more long-term effects of these kind of processes,
are unknown.
That's the thing. Yeah.
But also that the common mealworms are meant to biodegrade the styrofoam, so there's not actually microplastics in them. It becomes body mass and different gases. But, there are so many unknowns.
And that's also with the whole idea about plastic imaginaries, to think about what visions came with plastics when it was first introduced. It was very much this ridding ourselves from the constraints of nature and being able to shape the world the way we want to. And now things in our environment speaks back. Like, all of a sudden we have stones that are also including plastics, and that wasn't part of that vision. So what does it then mean to reimagine, or making the plastic imaginaries plastic, or
And I guess I just also wanted to add that most probably we already have lots of plastics in our bodies basically all the time. It's really difficult to do those measurements, but from what we've read, most likely we all already have it. There are probably no positions of being not entangled with plastics today.
Yeah, thank you for the story. I really like it. And as a paleontologist, I can maybe add some story, just because it's interesting. It's not a co-referat or something. I just want to... It remembers me, this plastic story remembers me in a story which happened in the Carboniferous. I think it's something like 300 million years ago. And there was, during that time, you had, for the first time on Earth, really lots of woods somewhere on land. And these woods, the wood died, the trees died, and some of them fell into the ocean. And they were waste in that kind, from some new organisms who wasted around and messed around and made terrible things on the sea. And there was a big extinction in the sea during that time, because there was all these nutrients now in the sea, and it was really disastrous in the end of the Devonian, actually it was. So it was before the Carboniferous, when these coals extended. And on the other side, it was a big chance for other organisms who used this driftwood as like ships, and they could drill in it and eat it. And so it was the same story. It was an entanglement, and some organisms used it. It was a catastrophe. And that's why this goes back to this story of the Anthropocene. This is not an exceptional time. We humans do the things like all organisms. We mess around, and we do good things and bad things, and we have to find good ways to act. And what I want to say, and artists and the scientists in a way are the same. We mess around with each other, and we can also find good ways to do something together.
Thanks for that story.
That was great. You can pass it on to just behind you.
Yes. I have one question. Thank you very much for your story and your research, which is very fascinating, because this is what art actually, or artists actually can, to investigate, to circle around a theme, and to associatively bring things together. So my question would be, how do you convey this story or your investigation to others? How do you animate others to do similar things? To break boundaries, or to jump associatively to other realms and bring different realms together. How do you do that? That would be my question for this art-science collaboration as well. So that is not only confined within this circle, for example, but also
involve others?
I mean, we work in so many different ways. We are both teachers at the university. We host workshops, we write narratives, we have exhibitions. But I think what I appreciate the most and what I feel works the best in kind of engaging with these kind of thoughts or processes is through the a bit longer time workshops. And I don't know how to kind of make that travel into a text or an image or a manual. I think it's very difficult.
So as you said, I think we have to use so many different languages and in order to move or be moved by others, and yet it's so limited what we can do. And we've been thinking a lot about should we go further into production side of, for example, we're in design departments. In what way can we influence the future designs? And what about politics? Like, how do we interfere, or what interfaces are there with party politics, for example, which is an important way of making decisions today. But like really thinking through where are the decisions made, and then seeing both that there are so many possibilities, but also extreme limits of what we can do. But not focusing too much on one kind of decision making, but many kinds of decision makings that are being made in society. But I think some kind of formal and informal teaching, or even if it's not teaching, sounds too much of one directional, but also being open for what others have to say and what we can learn. Was there another one?
Thank you. For me, holding this, there's a real beauty in it, and part of what I'm trying to learn here is how can artists produce beauty to serve the planet and the preservation of the world. It's got a tactile beauty, a visual beauty. How permanent is this? Because I'd love to use this in my art, for instance, if I had big 2x2 sheets, for instance. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, it of course depends on how you use it. If you can't wash it with really hot water, but maybe 1 or 2 months, I would say, or maybe let's say 1 month, but then you can just re-wax it.
That's my question, really. What's the next step to make it permanent?
Well, I think that's the point, that it's not permanent, because if it was permanent, then we would have the same problem as we have had with plastics.
Right.
Do you see, like, that these composts, you can drop it here, and it would eventually. So I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of the ongoingness of things, that it's in constant change, and that's what we need to be attentive to. That there are both new eco-services was mentioned before, and I don't, like, I am not apt for, I'm not the best to have an in-depth discussion about that, but you know, in a way, the wax moth caterpillars are doing an eco-service to us. And we didn't know that before, but now it's been observed, so that now that's part of the knowns. But we also don't know what is already happening with other species that can do things for us. And then, I guess we're very influenced by Donna Haraway as a feminist technoscientist, biologist, and cultural studies scholar. And she reminds us about staying with the trouble and being attentive to what we have around us,
but also very much to foster or nurture response ability, so the ability to respond to what it is that has been observed or known, which I think is a beautiful way of putting it, that it's not that we can't look for responses that would be the same all the time, but we can look for a capability of being able to respond to what we have at hand. Oh.
Okay,
thank you very much. We are in the